Before I go any further, I just want to repeat what I said at the end of my computation and explain it again. Suppose I take this value, b squared minus 4ac, and I examine it. If this b squared minus 4ac happens to be positive, then in this formula, which solves for the general quadratic, I happen to know I have the root of a positive number, which is going to give me a positive number. So when I take plus or minus that positive number, if I add it and I subtract it, I get different things. So because of that, if this value is greater than 0, that gives me two solutions. If this is equal to 0, then I get root 0 right here. And if I add or subtract 0, I get the same thing. So I'm going to get negative b over 2a no matter what. So that's just going to give me one solution. And if it's less than 0, I get no solutions. So we want to give this a name because it's a handy way to tell right off the bat whether or not a quadratic equation will have 0, 1, or 2 solutions. Discriminant, or the discriminant, is what we call it. Okay. We'll focus a little more on that in a moment. But maybe, you know what? Maybe let's try to use the discriminant to tell whether or not something has a solution or doesn't have a solution. For example, in the past, we looked at this equation. 3x squared plus x plus 8 equals 0. We ended up seeing it had no solutions after doing a bunch of work and completing the square. But if we just took b squared, and remember, a is 3, b is 1, and c is 8 here. Coefficient of x is 1, so we get 1. So if I take b squared minus 4ac, is this going to be greater than 0, equal to 0, or less than 0? Well, this is 1 minus a pretty large positive number, so this is definitely less than 0. So this definitely has no solutions. So I would know right off the bat, before having to do any other work, that this does no solutions. However, remember we also looked at 3x squared plus x minus 8. And that would have a discriminant of b squared minus 4ac. So I would get b squared. So now we have a equals 3, b equals 1, and c equals minus 8. So if I want to compute b squared minus 4ac, what happens? I get 1 squared minus 4 times 3 times minus 8. And without even writing out what this is, negative and negative, that's going to give me a positive. 1 plus a positive number is positive. And for a positive discriminant, I have two solutions. So this equation has two solutions. And this equation has no solutions. And we could have done that before doing any completing the square in order to determine or see whether or not a problem's worth solving or find out how many solutions we're going to get when we're done. So now that we've covered that, maybe let's try to work on using that quadratic formula to solve some more quadratic equations.